Hello summoners and welcome back to Mobalytics, where today we have the patch 9.6 update video talking about some of the things we missed, some of the things we got right, as well as our standard Q&A. Wanted to give one more shout out to our giveaway this time. We have a giveaway giving away some awesome prizes. We have RP, statues, and Mobalytics Premium, 1 year Mobalytics Premium subscription. Every tier list we've been doing this giveaway, so this is round 3 of our giveaway series. So make sure you check out the link in the description down below, follow to the Twitter post, and then sign up for the giveaway today. Make sure you guys enter because we are giving away some awesome stuff. Like we said, statues, RP, and Mobalytics Premium. So for this tier list Q&A video, what we want to do is start off for patch 9.6, now that we're a week into the patch, talking about what we got right and what we got wrong, and some of the things we missed, some of the things we hit on correctly, and tell you guys and update you with the best possible tier list. So for this patch, a couple of things that have popped up that we've seen a bit more of are things like Hecarim in the top lane and jungle. Hecarim received several buffs back to back, and that is now making him much stronger than before. Crazy how that kind of works. He received a bug fix and intentional fix on the previous patch, allowing his Q to properly deal the damage that it was supposed to, and now with the new Conqueror Keystone, both in the top lane and in the jungle, there are some Hecarims doing very well. We rate him and we add his new ranking at A tier for high elo and B tier for low elo. On top of that, let's talk about Urgot. So Urgot received some changes and another little mini rework on this patch, and has been popping up now both in top lane and once again in the jungle, similar to Hecarim. Actually, Urgot's clear is quite good for the jungle, and there are many professional players playing it. In fact, I'll leave a link to a profile in the description down below for Dopamine Hunter, which is Acadian, TSM's jungler. Been playing some Urgot jungle in higher elo games, and it seems quite good. The clear is good, Blue Smite is really good for him, and Black Cleaver as a second item makes you a very strong duelist. On top of that, it's not Unsealed Spellbook anymore, but it's actually Conqueror, and because of this, we now see Urgot as S tier in the top lane for high elo in top lane, and then we see him as A tier in high elo jungle as well. For low elo, he's not a jungler that we want to put on the list, but he'll be an S tier for low elo top lane. Riot has already stated that they will be putting in some Kayle nerfs in the future, but for this patch we missed out on Kayle mid lane. This champion has been doing much better, both obviously in the top lane, and is one of the best, if not the best top laners in the game right now, but also in the mid lane. Surprisingly, she does quite well for both mid and low elo, and then in high elo she falls off a bit in mid lane because some of the best mid laners will punish you, but she still does quite good. On top of that, there are a couple of changes to Kayle that made her quality of life a bit better and making it much easier to use your W and E. So even though she did receive some nerfs to her heal ratio on her ability for her W on that heal, and she did receive some nerfs to her base AD, Kayle is still really good, and obviously with this Klepto build she seems to be quite OP on the patch. As far as some of the things that we got correct, it seems like Talia mid, when we put her in high elo A tier, seems super solid, and as one of the best mid laners in the game right now, you can go Electrocute, Dark Harvest, or even Phase Rush as a Talia mid setup, and it turns out she's even pretty good in the jungle, so we were able to predict that one and get that one pretty darn correct. On top of that, Morgana mid and support is something that we had on the previous patch, and it seems so good. In fact, I suspect Morgana receiving some nerfs in the future because of just how strong she is in the mid and support role. Finally, we also got Xayah decently correct on the previous patch. Xayah jumped up about 1 to 2% win rates for both the mid and low elo criteria. On top of that, it has around double the games played from the previous patch. Turns out her buffs were significant and solid enough to move her around B or A tier, so finally bringing Xayah back onto the tier list, especially when paired with a Rakan, seems perfectly fine and as a totally recommendable champion if you do play Xayah. She was really bad before, but these buffs were helpful. Starting off with our questions this week, coming from YouTube for our Q&A, Michael Melendez said, "Can you explain exactly what you mean by skill floor, skill ceiling, and learning curve in the Q&A video?" Absolutely, Michael. This is a fantastic question, and understanding these three pieces of terminology is really important if you're watching our tier list and you're learning from higher elo players telling you which champions are hard to play, what is their difficulty, stuff like that. So skill floor by definition just means how hard is a champion to play at first, meaning their very first learning curve. A good example of this is Garen is probably one of the lowest skill floor champions in the game because all of his abilities are very simple. His combo is understandable, where you just get them low and then you press your ultimate, and your W is useful, but ultimately not that impactful of an ability if you have to use it completely perfectly, which you really don't. Garen is a low skill floor champion. A high skill floor champion would be something like Azir or Ryze, where probably your first 5 to 10 games you will just feed out of your mind, because understanding their combos, understanding their laning, not getting ganked a bunch, that sort of thing is really tough to find out. Skill ceiling by definition is then how hard is a champion over time, meaning reaching their maximum potential. I would argue that Caitlyn is a low skill floor champion, but a very high skill ceiling champion. You see this technically in a lot of Caitlyn's with how good they place their traps, as well as cancel some of their animations and use their ultimate, as well as playing in their laning phase, abusing their range, and even sieging mid to late game. Caitlyn has a very high skill ceiling because the difference between a 50 games Caitlyn and a Caitlyn one trick would be pretty high as well. The term learning curve is pretty much just a combination of their skill floor and their skill ceiling making up their overall learning curve, meaning that you would expect over time your champion win rate to be higher and higher the more games you have. You might have a 45% win rate in your first 10 games of Ryze, but you may have a 55% win rate in your next 50 games of Ryze. That kind of just makes up their learning curve. Zerope T said, why is Lulu considered hard on your tier list, but Soraka and Janna are easier? Typically, Lulu wasn't that hard of an enchanter to play, and compared to Soraka and Janna was around the same level of difficulty. However, a couple seasons ago, or around last season, Riot did actually nerf Lulu's shield from a 6-second duration to 2.5 seconds, which is cutting its time by over 50%. You have less than half of what you used to have. This means that the timing in which you need to use your shield is extremely tight to block abilities, and on top of that, Lulu's laning phase is much worse than it used to be due to some other nerfs, which also means that you must be able to abuse your Qs, your auto attacks, and polymorph and use your ultimate at the correct time. There are just other enchanters that are a bit easier to play in that role and do what Lulu has to do in order to win, and that's why she's quite difficult. In your opinion, why do you think Jinx is powerful and clearly strong, yet her ban rate is extremely low? There are better options to ban, underestimation, and people feeling like Jinx isn't that unfair to play against, worth a ban, etc. This is a great question, and honestly has been something that has been prevalent in League for quite a while. There are champions that typically do have low ban rates when people think that they just don't feel that unfair to play against, or clearly have some kind of weakness even though the rest of their kit is, by definition, very powerful. A good example of this is Ahri. Typically speaking, Ahri has around a 53 to 55% win rate in solo queue, and at times has had even higher than that, and rarely competes with the ban rates of things like Zed, Yasuo, Riven, Vayne, Thresh, Draven, stuff like that. There are just champions in League of Legends that people don't like to play against. There are champions that they think are broken, overpowered, unfun, stuff like that. And Jinx is usually not one of those champions because her clear weakness is to assassins. However, Jinx is a strong champion at the moment and has some really good tools, such as her reset mechanic, the buffed zap that they gave her a couple patches back, and her rocket being incredibly good. Those three things allow her to snowball really hard, and if you do well in one teamfight as Jinx, people can play around her and become really powerful and output tons and tons of DPS. It's just that Jinx is quite exploitable in the laning phase, and a really good Kalista or Draven player will make her life a nightmare, but most of the time you're not going to go up against that in solo queue. Stefan Trinix said, what do you think about Riven Jungle? I played her a few games in low elo, and I would start red and level 2 ganked mid or bot and got first blood or flash. Sorry for my English. Ever since Riven has popped up as a really strong champion with Spear of Sojin, the buff Last Whisper, Conqueror, all that kind of stuff, Riven Jungle has seen some more play as well, and we've seen it quite a lot from Damwon in Korean LCK, and their jungler Canyon actually plays it quite a bit. He typically does go Aftershock, but sometimes he has gone Conqueror, and Riven Jungle is actually not too bad. It's always had a decent clear, and you can clear red, you can clear wolves, blue, Gromp, and Krugs quite easily. You just struggle with the Raptor camp early on into the game unless you take Hunter's Talisman, but you can fight over crabs, you're a decently strong early game ganker, and you scale really well, and at level 6, it's almost impossible to get out of your jungle ganks as Riven, and that's why I really like Riven Jungle. I think if you play Riven, it's perfectly fine, and it's only slightly worse than top lane Riven, but if you don't play Riven at all and you're just a jungle main, it's like a B tier jungler. It can work, but I wouldn't always recommend it for junglers because there's other carry junglers that I think are quite a bit better, such as Kha'Zix or Nidalee right now in higher elos, or if you can one-trick them. Our last question this week comes from Instagram from Miguel Egypto. Says, could you talk about Mord mid? Sure, we can totally talk about Mordekaiser. I think Mordekaiser mid, and more specifically Mordekaiser, is underrated and has been for quite a while. There are a couple of Mordekaiser mains that make that champion look OP. It's like he's just sitting there and he's 0-3 and then you gank him and randomly he will double kill you and the jungler. Mordekaiser is a funny champion. And one thing about him that's worth noting is that he is receiving a rework very soon, which has been making it hesitant for us to actually rate him. We would say in the bot lane, Mordekaiser's a B or A tier bottom laner, and probably a B or A tier mid laner, and maybe even a B tier top laner, but because of the fact that he is receiving a rework very soon, it's just hard to pick him up right now. He does take a couple of games to learn. Surprisingly, the champion is not the easiest thing to play because he's just so weird and different, and he has a ton of bugs that you should understand, both playing against and as Mordekaiser. That being said, I do think Mord is quite good. Like we said, he's pretty good with Phase Rush, Dark Harvest, Summon Aerie, and even Guardian as a bottom laner, and he can do well in those roles. It's just that truly Mordekaiser is buggy, he's a bit awkward to play, and unless you're a one-trick, I just don't necessarily recommend him for you guys. Anyway, thanks for watching our tier list update and Q&A. Make sure if you have any more questions, leave in the comment section down below, and use Mobalytics today at mobalytics.gg and sign up for our giveaway using the link in the description down below. Follow to the tweet and enter our giveaway to win some awesome prizes.